All right. Hello, Angelo. Oh, Angelo, thank you also for sharing the post. It's always really appreciated. People share posts to get more reach. Is there anybody who hasn't been as a MedTalk before? So that I explain how we do that here. Well, you guys know now. Miriam hasn't been. Okay, well, then I give until we wait for it's 3 past, so we wait another 2 minutes. I will just tell you a bit about MedTalks. MedTalks used to be MedTalks with Doris and Kathrin. Since Doris had a few other things to take care of, I took MedTalks by myself now, and I think I'm coping well so far. And we usually have this quite more like a conversation, but we have slides to like have a red thread through the conversation, so that we don't lose the words we want to say, or that sometimes when we're nervous, we also forget important things. So yeah, that's how MedTalks works. As I said, I recorded, I put it on my website. I will share the link tomorrow on LinkedIn also with some other useful tips and tricks, and also the websites from Mark and Noor. So you have like a compact set tomorrow. And the people who want to rewatch some parts, or the people who couldn't join today, they are usually quite thankful that we have that recording now. MedTalks has been around since a year almost, or a bit more than a year, but we started recording it only in March because then I decided to invest a bit more into MedTalks and get this paid Google Workspace account so that I can record it. That's why you only find 3 recordings so far on my website. But I hope it's going to get a little more over the time. Well, it's 5 past now. I managed 2 minutes, a monologue, perfect. But now I would like to start a trialogue with Mark and Noor. As you all know, we are going to talk about linguistic validation and cognitive debriefing today in the first part of our talk. And I would like to start with telling you who we are actually talking to. And today's no ladies first. We start with Mark first. Would you like to tell us a bit more about Gibson Research Consultancy, which is your firm?
I could easily just read the slide. So we are a health communication and research company. So that takes us across several fields: clinical space, post-marketing space, in terms of just like medicine information leaflets that you would get in packs of medicines. We write and test them, and we are involved in usability testing of technologies. For example, electronic clinical outcome assessments. And we work across, I think with Mozambique, that will be country and territory 198. And we have a network of about 23,000 professionals, so interviewers and psychologists and academic researchers. I have to ask my resourcing manager for that because it changes every quarter. Our website was published about 8 months ago, and it says 17,000, but it's definitely 23,000 now. We are based in the United Kingdom. We have an office in Guatemala. We have staff in Algeria, Philippines, and we have, as of last week, an office in Spain.
Wow, that's amazing. You're growing. How long has Gibson Research Consultancy been around? Is that 30 years?
No, I think 30 years in terms of my own experience. Not quite 30 years, actually, but the company itself was set up in 2008. And I had a company previous to then, and I basically just took time off to spend some time with my children, which was a privilege, really. And I decided just to start doing something. And that something was basically almost like a market stall of everything that I could possibly do. And the demand for linguistic validation just took off. It was crazy. There wasn't even any runway. It was just from here to up in the sky, and I was managing all on my own for far too long, really far too long. And then I gradually built a team, which is the team is still with me as well.
Awesome. Oh, that says a lot about you, I'd say. And now you are also co-directoring the Art of Diversity, which leads us slowly to Noor. Amazing. How did that happen?
Well, I'm passing the baton to Noor now.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to talk to you about the linguistic race up into the sky in the next question, but that's going to be really interesting for most of us, I guess. Well, then, Noor, you have the ball. How did it happen that you?
How did it happen? Well, I'm the founder of Art of Diversity, and it started more with my vision for helping patients, and because I'm a physiotherapist and osteopath, but I was always working as a medical translator for more than 20 years. I worked with linguistic validation as well. And then I got, as many of you know, I'm an MS patient and also neurodivergent. So sometimes I get blocked or my mind goes blank, and you need to help me get back on track. I always prefer to say that. Otherwise, I get super nervous and I can't talk. So it's okay. And in my way to reinventing myself, because I couldn't keep working with my clinical practice, I just focused more and more into Art of Diversity as a way of really keep being of service to patients, because it's a vocation of mine. And Art of Diversity started developing and including, apart from linguistic validation projects and coordinating projects, in my case, projects for Spanish for Spain. I was a linguistic validation consultant only, but then I started also coordinating projects. And at a point, I was contacted by different companies. They wanted to implement the service in their company, so I helped them and I trained them. And then that gave me the idea of creating an established course in order to train colleagues, medical translators, but also healthcare professionals into linguistic validation, because I saw there was a gap, and also there was let's say a need for training, because more and more translators were given work as linguistic validation experts, where they just didn't have the expertise mainly for cognitive debriefing, which is a complex process. And since I love doing this, I just gave it a try, and it worked great. And in that journey, Mark came along, and the school is just expanding, and he's introducing the part of patient voice research together with different aspects of linguistic validation, but mainly cognitive debriefing. And sharing with him, we decided to just join forces and have him as co-director, but not only for the school, but also for other areas in which Art of Diversity is growing, which is Art of Diversity Press. This is a new thing, because we write books together, and also we want to publish books focusing on medicine, health, and humanities. One of, I don't know, the possible books that we are going to be publishing is Kathrin Kunz's How to Speak Cancer, if we are lucky. Your book, of course. And yeah, it's a dream. It's a romantic endeavor, of course, but it's part of something that I retrieved from my past, because I was an editor in the past. I had a publishing house many years ago, and it's just like in Art of Diversity, everything I am comes together, but now blending it with Mark's knowledge as well. So that's that. And then there's also an opening for Art of Diversity research, which also it's something that Mark is going to be directing as well, and focusing on cross-cultural adaptation and diversity and all those areas which are just a passion, really.
Awesome. Yeah, one feels that you both are passionate about what you're doing. I think that's amazing. But how did you get the business development into Mark's company? So you're kind of getting like together in all kinds of ways.
Should I tell a story about that?
Oh, yes, please.
So no, got onto my radar line of vision about 15 months ago. Apparently, No had been onboarded by GRC some time ago, but I'm not involved in that, so I didn't know. And then suddenly there's this person who's saying, I'm an expert in linguistic validation, and I'm going to train everybody to be excellent cognitive debriefers and linguistic validators. And I'm thinking, who are you? You know, just stay out of my way, like that. And so we were very kind of wary with each other.
No, he was. I had no problem with him. He was.
Do you see something, Laura?
Yeah, no, it's true. And so, but we kept engaging in conversations and things. And the thing that did it for me was just all of the other things that No can do. Like, she's a published poet. And the real thing that broke me, I've got to tell you, is the Tolkien. The Tolkien speciality. So you are an accredited translator for Tolkien works in Spanish?
Yes, I'm one of the official translators of J.R.R. Tolkien's works. Wow. So yeah,
and so I like the Tolkien. I didn't like the linguistic validation bits, like, you know, keep out of my way. And then we just started talking to each other via a mutual friend, actually, Natalie Nedkova, who's also a competitor. She's a real competitor.
She's big, right? I saw her too.
Yeah. No, she's great. And so we started talking, and I was still really cautious of No. And then I saw the texture of her course, and I met her students. A lot of them are here now, and I thought, wow, this is special. There's nothing really on the market for that, and there's nobody teaching linguistic validation with the passion, the precision, and the depth that No is doing. And so, therefore, she is developing an army of very competent people, like elite linguists. I could tell you about a pyramid, but that's going to be in a blog article. That's in a blog article. But the linguists that No attracts are from the apex. They are the elite, and you know, I'm very happy and very fortunate to be associated with them.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And I noticed that well, basically people don't like me and people like No, so I thought, you know, bring No into GRC as business development and just be the nicer face than I am.
Well, I can't imagine that nobody likes you. But I get the decision that you took No under your, how you say, umbrella.
Yeah.
because yeah, you two are just an amazing team, I guess. I feel that right away. And Noor, I have to say, your poems are amazing in this. Like, I really want to tell you guys, get her books, because I'm not someone who reads poems usually, but I couldn't take them away. Yeah.
You got that one.
And I'm so grateful that I got a poem from you to open my book. I just showed it to a friend today and she just got goosebumps. And when I told her the story with your dad and the tree my daughter drew, everything just comes together and it just feels so perfect. And I'm really, really grateful. So thanks again for offering me that.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are a really healing person, I think. And I never heard about that healing words before, but when I read it on your page, I really liked it. And also the combination with Mark and the rare languages and the healing words, I think that's some crazy combination, but in a good way, crazy.
Yeah. I'm really, really flattered. Thank you so much. In truth, well, I'm very honored to have my poem there. I was really thrilled when you asked me. I was like, what? So beautiful. And I'm about to publish in Art of Diversity Press. This it's going to be the first book really published with our publishing house. That book of poems, it's called Inner Light, Love Walking Barefoot, and that's where your poem is. And well, I wanted to say something more about the business development thing, which is, in truth, I started doing business development for companies in relation to linguistic validation, and when it was okay, and it's something I really like very much. I don't know why. I like talking with clients and just helping people get together. Mark calls me the Nexus. So I said, well, maybe it's something that I can do more, in a more active way. And I have to say that I really, really love Mark's company. I always did. I came across it in 2021. And it gave me this impression of really researched, right? And he didn't say much about himself there, but about the company, because he was kind of, I don't know, hidden. Or you couldn't find who Mark Gibson was. No, it's just Mark Gibson Research Consultancy, but then, but the energy that gave me and what I could feel was really deep thing, and I liked it, and I applied, and they said yes, and I was there. I never got a project, but I was there, and and I really believe in the company. I think it's brilliant, and Mark is super modest, and I want to give it a try and give it all I have, because it has values that really help patients improve their lives, and that's why I do this. So that's what made me decide to just stop consulting for other companies and say, okay, I'm exclusive, with GRC, and I'm joining. And I love the invitation from Mark, and I really believe in it, because I think we need to believe in things in order to. And I don't do anything anymore that I don't believe in.
Oh, I get that. And that's the best outcomes come out of those projects, right? If you just do something because you have to do it, it won't be as good. It's just that easy. That's
the gift of being or going through illnesses, which many of us do or have. But in my case, 2 entire years in bed.
Wow.
Gave me a lot of thought, and just to really decide, from the heart, and because we don't know how long we're going to be here, so better live it authentically and with everything. So Another aspect that we have together, it's the Patient Voice and Linguistic Validation Cafe podcast.
Yes, true. We missed that
Yeah.
part.
And it started really as a gathering because in our courses, we create community. The idea of the courses is not just to have the course and then that's it, but create community, support each other, grow together. I help my students just try to find jobs as well. And translators tend to be very isolated, and here it's like a kind of support group even, and helping each other professionally but also personally, and developing friendship, and as well as even doing research together, and helping grow linguistic validation into what we call now applied patient voice research, which is a term coined by our dear Arleta Rosenska, who is here today with us. And it's one of our preferred researchers as well. And so we are just contributing and being another voice in the linguistic validation and patient voice research industry. So the Linguistic Validation Cafe is like a crazy gathering. It's very informal. We just get together. We do it ourselves. And now Mark, of course, is co-host there. And since he has got into it, he has brought much more depth and aliveness and fun, and introduce the patient voice thing and make us, realize that it's not only linguistic validation. We can tap into patient voice research. And also we have courses planned for next year in that direction. And so it's like we are, let's say, uplifting each other, and then trying to help others uplift. So it's really a gift, I cannot say.
As I said, you guys are a really perfect match, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, shall we move on to our questions, just for the ones who have absolutely no idea what linguistic validation is?
Exam question. Kathrin, brief answer. What linguistic?
I would like to know.
Amazing linguistic validation consultants here, and really incredible people, healthcare professionals with all their hearts. So, we can just get them involved. And
I forgot to say that. The others here can also unmute themselves and speak, as long as not like 3 people speak at the same time, or ask questions in the chat or live if you wish. You can do that. So who would like to answer the question, what is linguistic validation? Anybody? How about Noor? If nobody wants.
Oh, okay. Of course. It was just a crazy thing for a moment, but I wasn't going to put you on the spot, really. No worries.
I mean, it's a good engagement. Like if somebody wants to engage, but I don't want to force anyone.
Of course.
I'm still trying to figure all that out. So this is really interesting for me.
Well, linguistic validation, I would say now, it's applied patient voice research. Mark, say.
Yeah, so, I mean, let's just go back to the beginning. Linguistic validation was a process by which a translation of a clinical outcome assessment, you have to make sure that it's conceptually equivalent. All of the content of that clinical outcome assessment needs to be conceptually equivalent. So sickness, illness in the source language, which is typically a variety of English, needs to have the same meaning in Tagalog or Korean or French, German. And so that's basically the essence of it, just to make sure that that happens, and it goes through a specific steps of translation, which Noah will talk about because she is the real expert in it. I'm an expert as well, but I'll just be lazy. I prefer cognitive debriefing, to be honest. But one of the things so it goes through those translation steps, and then it goes through a period of patient consultation, which is cognitive debriefing. And so if the clinical outcome assessment has to do with an element of living with asthma or diabetes, then you would have to seek asthma or diabetes patients respectively, unless you were told otherwise. Sometimes there's a growing need for just general population as well, and that is good news for everybody, to be honest. So the purpose of the patient consultation phase is just to make sure that it's understandable, and the preferred method of that is cognitive debriefing, but it's not the exclusive method. The whole purpose of that is just to get people to talk aloud, to talk back at the interviewer. What, I don't know, have you been tired over the past 7 days means in the translated version, and that their responses will give us proof of comprehension, whether they understand it or not. And very often we need to look at the texture of what they say, because sometimes you can be using quite weak interviewers where it just goes into a surface level, whereas I think depth is always the best option for that. Now, the struggle I have with linguistic validation, as what Noah said, is that it seems sometimes I just don't know what it's for. Really, I mean, obviously I know what it's for. It's for a submission. It's to make sure that we have proof of understanding and that proof of conceptual conceptual equivalence. But it's the spirit in which it's been done that sometimes frustrates me. And like, for example, it feels almost like a factory setting where it's like Spanish for Spain questionnaire validated, French for Canada questionnaire validated, and it's just like that. It's like a conveyor belt in a factory, and I feel that it has removed itself somewhat from the patient consultation and the patient voice, as Noah said.
Yeah, I hear. Since when has linguistic validation been around? Because the past month you keep hearing LV everywhere, and that's actually also how I got my ears into this direction. Because but you said something or that made me think, is this just a blur? Is this like, where does it come from? And it must have been around for a long time already. Why is it so like popular right now?
I think there's been several phases of it. It was an academic pursuit initially, and it was pioneered by companies like MAPI Research Institute in France, which coincidentally both Noah and I started with, and it's a company I have immense respect for, really. But there were other companies around at that time, like Oxford Outcomes, and those were specialist research companies. And obviously there was a much smaller number of COA. Of COA. There was no E then at that time, and then it's been conducted forever, really. I mean, there's versions of it from the 1950s, 60s, 70s. I guess it took shape in the 80s and 90s, where MAPI sort of really took it and molded it into something that was usable and repeatable as well. So it was standardized, basically. So the second phase was just the explosion of it been adopted by other companies, and so from around 2008, there was a lot of LSP companies who were getting involved and just sticking to the script, sticking to the guidance that was published in 2009. And the result of that is there's an element of painting by numbers, of so like 1 for red and 2 for green and that kind of thing. People just looking to coloring well within the lines, and I think that it's caused, in terms of the discipline, possibly a lack of growth, arguably, and a lack of critical thinking in the area, just because it's like a hamster wheel. I always say it's a hamster wheel where it is like that factory setting. And the reason why everybody knows about it now, why it's become such a buzzword, it's because of there's this phenomenon called the service refugees that I've written about, and it's basically people who whose initial commercial proposition has been eroded by AI and automation in general, and so people are rushing towards areas that they perceive as immune to AI, and that is patient consultation. Nora and I have just written a book about AI and patient voice research. And is it immune to AI? It's not, because people are using or talking about chatbots as interviewers. And there's even more comfort in talking about just have ChatGPT make up a load of patients into specific demographic profiles. 2 years ago, that would have been research fraud to even consider that, but there seems to be more comfort around that. And the regulatory competent authorities like FDA, EMA need to act pretty quickly in order to stop that kind of thing happening.
Absolutely. I think it's disgusting. As Noor said, the synthesized patients that can't ever lead to something useful. It's just, we discussed it on Tuesday, I think it was, quite a bit about AI and the impact on us all. But I'm open to a lot of things, but this is just gross. Really, it's disgusting.
No, it's just not possible. Obviously, we're not anti-AI, and there are things that we can do with AI very well. For example, I can appear as an organized person with AI, whereas ordinarily not. And there are things that we should not do. There's a red line.
Exactly.
You shouldn't be using AI for writing.
Are you aware of the FDA and the EMA? Do they consider regulating that, or did you hear anything about that?
I'm a little bit behind with my reading about the regulations, but it's changing week by week in terms of the discussion around it. And I was involved in a lot of the kind of pioneering the readability testing in the 2000s with the EMA, and my company had a seat at the table with decision makers, and it really gave me an insight into how slow regulators are. Not because I have a huge lot of respect for people who work at EMA, MHRA, and FDA, CDC, places like that, but they don't work at the same pace as industry. And it could be a huge problem, because otherwise there could be a flood of submissions where people have done an 80-country study, and every single patient is synthesized. Or if patients are interviewed, then it's all just being done on a chatbot. And what can the competent authorities do? Can they say this is rejected? The legal argument could be that you didn't say that we couldn't do that. So
exactly. But then in the end, it's the patients suffering from that decisions. I mean, I wonder if I imagine having an interview with a maybe 70, 80-year-old person who can't hear really well, who might not be able to read what is written. So you have to be really empathic and help that person just to understand the question. That won't ever work with a chatbot. And so certain conditions you really can't, it's just impossible. And if people, I read a lot about patient organizations who are trying to mentor people in clinical trials. And so that means that someone who is ill wants to go into a clinical trial, and they get someone who had the same experience in the best case. And then this one would help them to understand and go through the trial and all that stuff. So I had the impression actually that it's going more into this direction. It's getting more human, more helpful to be in a clinical trial as well. And as I said last time, I do believe in the good, and I'm positive. I hope it's gonna be good, and that people will say, no, I'm not even participating in an interview like that. And I translate a lot of pharmacy market research, also questionnaires, which are for interviewers who would interview doctors, for example, about whatever. And I'm just thinking now that you're saying that, I wonder if that is a person doing the interview. I need to ask that. It's interesting thought. I never thought about that. It's just so normal that a person interviews a person, right?
Yeah, and I heard one of the top people. I think I said this in the meeting last week, in the discussion we had last week. One of the top people in the COAs space who said that they had been using chatbots as interviewers for midpoints in clinical trials, just midpoint feedback. And this person said that the chatbot showed more empathy than a human interviewer. Now, I keep hearing that, but
what?
Who is measuring that? How is empathy measured? So I think there's a lot of mantras that are being repeated around AI about perceived empathy and that kind of thing that really may not hold water in terms of scientific rigor.
Yeah, I mean, humans want to talk to humans, and I keep reading that here in Sweden, for example, the youth, like the young people, they get more and more back into real social contacts and draw themselves back from social media because they feel like they are missing out on real contact, which is again something that makes me hope that
I hope so.
All this crazy AI and chatbot stuff will,
Well, one of the drivers for you can say that you mentioned that people would be, the human is becoming more important. Yes, that's true, because patients are not subjects anymore. They are patients, they're people. And then there is this increase in the patient voice agenda. So if you go to a conference now and for the past 2 years, and probably for the next 2 years, every conference booth will have of a company will have some slogan or other about the patient voice and some slogan or other about AI. So there's, companies differ in terms of how sincere they are for the patient voice. And so if people can make a lot of money, like a huge amount of money, from simulating patients and using chatbots where there's no human in the room, they're going to do that until they're told that they're not that they can't do it.
Yeah, that's true. But we are going too much into AI right now.
Yes. Yeah.
We keep doing that. But
That's
it is interesting,
a
right?
good moderator.
I would like to talk about the screenshot I have here. You sent that to me. And one of you, I'm happy if one of you goes through this with us, leads us the way. What do all the arrows mean and all the terms, to get a more clearer picture of what we are doing in linguistic validation.
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Awesome, thanks.
Well, this is the workflow from MAPI specifically, and it's of course available. They are the ones who really, well, I guess, taking the ISPOR guidelines, they just created like a workflow that was really compliant. And then they have given the blueprint, let's say, to everyone else. It works well. It doesn't mean that it's perfect and that can't be improved. But, well, so far it's the one that, after seeing different workflows, still one of the ways to ensure that we attain translation precision and cultural adaptation. And since we are, well, as Mark explained, what we are doing in linguistic validation is translating and culturally adapting clinical outcome assessments. But clinical outcome assessments, well, for those who don't know, are these questionnaires, right, that are used in clinical trials, but also in medical practice, that ask for quality of life, symptoms, behaviors, different aspects of patients' experience, so that patients can have a voice in the medical process. But these clinical outcome assessments were not always called clinical outcome assessments. They first were patient-reported outcomes, really, or quality of life questionnaires, and they were intended for patients to answer, most of them, but developed by clinicians directly or by researchers without using patients' feedback for it. But then this evolved, and there were also, in parallel, questionnaires that only clinicians would answer in relation to patients. And then other questionnaires that were answered by the caregivers of patients, and also other questionnaires that would ask patients to perform a task, either cognitive task, draw a line with the shape, or a physical task, sit down and stand up several times or during some seconds or minutes. So these types of questionnaires came together, or were categorized into 4 flavors and under the umbrella of clinical outcome assessments. So that's what we do in the linguistic validation process. And since this is translation, this means that these questionnaires are used in the context of multi-country clinical trials. And the aim we have with that is to, let's say, the same questionnaire is going to be used so that the patient may produce feedback on, let's say, how the specific drug or intervention is for them, if the result is good or not, how they feel, so on and so forth. So we measure how patients feel, function, and survive. At least that's how it is defined. And this is like the beautiful part, where we see that, as Mark mentioned before, patients are not subjects anymore. They are people, and a drug may not be commercialized if, let's say, the results in quality of life are terrible for that person, even if the results in the biomarkers are great. So that's the part where we intervene in the sense of trying to adapt these questionnaires into the culture and the language that it's the target. But we need to try to get the questionnaire to be like a single questionnaire, regardless of the different languages. Let's say we have a clinical trial that it's going to be run in 20 different sites in 20 different countries, but the questionnaire needs to be exactly the same. Patients need to interpret the instructions, questions, and response choices and any other parts of the questionnaire the same way, so that when there is the pulling of the data, everything it's like there's no misinterpretations that may lead to errors in data. The result of this may be that an entire clinical trial may just have to be canceled if, let's say, patients have interpreted things in a different way. So it's not a small responsibility that we have there.
Yeah.
And the thing is that in order to try to, let's say, attain this single instrument, which is really an ideal, it's not a reality. It's not real that we can get a same instrument with all these languages because of many factors. One of them is that most of these questionnaires are developed with an Anglo-European framework. Most developers are from either the US or any Anglo country or Europe. And even though these questionnaires are developed in different languages and countries as well, but they are more prone to Anglo-European. So there is this issue, and then also because there are many aspects that just are not transferable into another language and culture. It's just impossible. Yeah. And even though we try, there are those limits. And even if we attain that, it's going to be forced. And for the patient, it's going to be something strange. And maybe the way of answering is not going to be accurate, but at least, well, the question may exist a bit. Yeah. So the first step that we do in truth is we get the source questionnaire. Of course, we check it for any issues that it may have. And
can be in English mainly, or would that
English, but if it's in another language, what we do is we linguistically validate it first into English, and then that questionnaire functions as working source for all the other languages. But we work in having let's say German was the real source. We have the German source, the English working source, and then we work from there. But we always have the German as reference, because the English one, it's really a translation. So we cannot have it as, take it as face value. So, so what we do is we extract let's say the entire questionnaire. We do what is called a concept elaboration, concept definition. We create a list of concepts, and the aim is to try to define each and every single concept, but as the developer intended, what the developer is intending to measure through this concept, because many of these questionnaires have lay language, and the words are very common, and we talk about emotions and we talk about functionality, but we may interpret it in many different ways. So we need to narrow it into what the developer means by that. So what we do is to make a very thorough definition. It's not just let's say a glossary of terms or synonyms. It's got to be thoroughly defined, and alternatives need to be provided, and many issues, cultural issues and linguistic issues need to be taken into account from readability perspectives, or languages that go left to right instead of right to left, visuals as well, and many taboos, and just many things. So, but we define this in English, and then this works as a blueprint for all the rest of the languages. So this is what we do first, and then the developer revises this. Sometimes the developer has created this concept elaboration, so we, let's say, expand on that or revise that. And what we do, if possible, is also what we call a translatability assessment, which doesn't appear here. So that's, again, analyzing the source for potential issues in translation. We have it divided into 4 levels of difficulty in translation. And in truth, this is something that should be done during the development phase of the questionnaire, so that let's say this questionnaire will have to be translated sometime in the future. So the developer, what does is asks for specialist linguists in a selection of different languages and countries is done following different, let's say, patterns, or for different reasons we select some languages depending on the family trees.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is analyze each language, and the feedback provided informs the developer into difficulties that will be encountered, so that the developer may modify the source, so to make it more translation friendly and cross-culture friendly. For example, issues with idioms, which always pose many problems. Well, the developer can choose to not use an idiom and instead something more descriptive. But also issues in relation to, which is always the problem, and Mark always tell me, you always give that example, but it's true, is a sex issue, and in many different countries it's just very complicated. Yes, or issues of gender, but also of race and ethnicity that pose many problems. And the thing is that not many developers take this into account, and then the source that we receive, well, it's very difficult to adapt culturally. So what we do is we have produced this concept elaboration list. We have our list of concepts, and we do translatability assessments, a selection, and we try to have the developer see if something can be modified. But modifying anything in a questionnaire like this, it's a huge process, and then we need to go through phases of cognitive debriefing again, and then psychometrics again. So it's not like simply saying, oh, okay, you can change this question, because take into account that developing a questionnaire like this, which it may be a single page, but it may take between 3 and 5 years of research.
That's what I was just going to ask. How long is that process? It sounds like it's really long.
Yeah, it's very long. Mm-hmm. So we do a translatability assessment, and at least we can anticipate potential issues and try to fix them from the start, or have our different in-country consultants, that is the people in charge of each of the languages for the linguistic validation process, so that they can just try to find solutions, and then try to come to agreements, let's say.
Yeah.
So once we develop that, we are ready, let's say, there's a selection, right, of all the vendors and everybody that is going to be involved, because this takes a lot of people working. And the first thing we do is let's say we have our 20 languages, and we launch the forward translations, and we run them in parallel. It's a dual forward translation. And we have for this medical translators ideally trained in linguistic validation, because but that's one of the issues that we have. We are giving this work to translators who are not experienced in clinical outcome assessments, and they just translate normally, and they don't take into account that this is for patients and all the cultural issues, and also what is behind and what the developer may be thinking. They don't do enough research, because when you do a project like this, you need to go to the article where the developer explains, what they are doing, or at least research as much as possible. And that's on your side. That's not on the company side. You need to do that as professional. So that's why Mark keeps saying all the time, linguistic validation is research. It's really research, and it's true. I know that as medical translators, we are used to doing research, but this, let's say, takes us a step further. So two translators will produce these two translations, and then we have this, ideally, this in-country consultant, this specialist in linguistic validation, to reconcile those two versions and come up with, using the list of concepts that has been produced, this blueprint that is that we need to follow, do reconciliation of both. And sometimes one is going to be chosen, sometimes the other, sometimes a mix of both. Other times it's going to be a mix of the three, and other times the version of the in-country consultant, because neither of the translators have understood what the item really is measuring and how it needs to be translated.
But that is so interesting. When I translate something, I call that localization. I said that the other day. And for me, that's a normal process in translating something, so that you're saying that measurements or stuff like that, or that they don't think who is going to read this. I never knew, like, for me, this is a normal process in translating something. And it's interesting to hear that this is obviously not normal. Or why is that? What do you think? I mean,
what happens is that many medical translators, what I have seen from my experience and in the courses, because this was firstly done by the in-country consultant's profile. In truth, is a medical translator who is also a healthcare professional in some area, and ideally used to treating patients. Yeah. So there's a difference when you are doing this process, having treated patients or being familiar with patients, and when it's not. And sometimes what happens is that medical translators may have a great skill in high register medical translation, which is very, very complex, and it's really amazing the work that we do there. But when it comes to these questionnaires for lay people and patients who need to, they just sometimes don't capture the experience of patients, because they just have not the experience with patients and how patients speak and express themselves and so on. So sometimes it's a bit difficult for them. But this is compensated, that's what I have seen, compensated with proper training, because when we produce linguistic validation consultants in our courses, they go through a deep process of learning in which they constantly understand that this is directly for the patients, and they understand clinical outcome assessments, where do they land in, and then they learn how to, let's say, wake a lot of dormant abilities that they have for caregiving, for listening, for empathy, and they start putting themselves in the position of a patient, remembering themselves as patients at some point. So it's kind of a psychological shift that needs to happen, and it occurs in the process of the course.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, because it's like training someone that has no healthcare experience, but has all the medical terminology, loves medicine, loves patients, because that's what I've seen most of the students I've had so far just give their hearts to patients. They came into medical translation because they want to help.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not just translation. They really feel like it, or their mom was a nurse, or the father was or the dad was a doctor, and they wished to become a physician, but they didn't in the end. So that's kind of a way of being into that world. So they have that in them. It's just a matter of making it come to life.
Yeah.
So
we got a question in the chat. Playing from Miriam. Playing the devil's advocate. If we look for linguistic validation on the web, we mostly find out about steps from forward translation to cognitive debriefing. But usually there is no mention to concept elaboration or even concept elicitation. Translatability assessment, why is that?
Well, concept elicitation is something hugely different to concept elaboration. It's a massive task that happens during the development of the clinical outcome questionnaire. And if there's any sponsors listening, we do that. We'd like more of that. So, yeah, sometimes concept elaboration and translatability is an afterthought, or are afterthoughts. And I get frustrated with the depth that companies go into. Really, sometimes, like Noah said, it can just be a list of synonyms, or taking a long question like, how much difficulty have you had to walk up a flight of stairs in the past 7 days, and just say this is a question of mobility, or this is a question about mobility, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of incorrect and inappropriate carrying out of concept elaboration. And translatability, again, it's the same thing. I think it's something that has evolved over the past few years, where before you would just send it out to a linguist, in-country consultant, and you would say, would you envisage any problems translating into X language, into your language, and if so, what would it be? And so you would just get a whole list of okay, no problem. But I think that's an area where the processes have improved. You can go into quite some detail. And the interesting thing is, I work with a company called CQ Fluency in New Jersey. I don't know if anybody works with them. If not, I would send them your CVs, because they're a lovely LSP. And we co-developed a method of doing translatability that builds on the new MAPI method, and it really goes into quite some depth. And my colleague at CQ Fluency came up with the term agnostic translatability. I don't know if she came up with it, but I always attribute it to her. So it's kind of like a bridge between concept elaboration and translatability proper, which would focus on a given language. So it would be German for Germany, or Swedish for Sweden, and another one for Swedish for Finland, and that kind of thing. But then, as a complement to the concept elaboration, you could just kind of scan languages in general. Would this concept cause any problem in any language? And that takes a lot of skill, but done properly, it's really amazing. And that acts as the bridge, and it prepares for the translatability proper, and then that prepares for better translations.
Awesome, thank you. I would just, before we keep going with the picture, there came another question, which is actually really interesting. I'm a little, Wendy asks, I'm a lot actually, embarrassed to ask. You don't need to be embarrassed, Wendy. But I'm curious to know how you determine the payment rate for translating a patient-reported outcome questionnaire, considering the linguistic validation and all the research that goes into it. Thanks a lot. Interesting question. How do you charge that? How do you actually know how much time you will need for it?
But actually, the translation of it.
Well, it says translation, but I think it's the whole process is meant.
Well, it's
I mean, the translation we know how to charge.
It will be typically 1 cent an hour.
Oh, is it that cheap in the UK?
No, I think unfortunately the way the industry is that it would conform pretty much to as it is. I don't know. No, would you agree with that?
Well,
would you charge that per project or per hour, or like the people?
No, it would be per word, really.
It's very complicated. Some parts will be charged per word, others per hour, and others incentives directly for patients, or
that's different.
But you have to pay. Yeah,
this points to a difference between Nora and I in terms of doctrine. We differ in our approach to who does the interviewing. So that's for.
No, but I mean, charging, even though the interviewing is done by a researcher, you have to pay them, and you pay them.
But
you pay them hourly, or you pay them, per word. Normally, you pay them hourly. So
I want to go back to the question then, because I think I misunderstood it. Was the question just talking about translation or translation and interviewing?
Can you tell us, Wendy, if the question is everything, like you want to know, like the whole process, or just
the
translation? All right. Yeah. The thing is, okay, so without cognitive debriefing, without the interviews to patients or clinician reviews or anything. Okay, just the 2 forward translations, you mean? Well, in truth, the translation parts, for example, the forward translations and the back translation, and then the proofreading tends to be like any other translation. Like we tend to charge it per word, as Mark said. So he had got your question right.
I knew I had it right.
You knew it. You knew it. You're always right. No problem.
Modest. Well, Mark, let's see if you can answer the next question right too. Another question that many people who just start hearing about LV raise is just about COAs. What about medical product summary of product characteristic, informed consent forms, or any other patient-focused content subject to strict regulatory guidelines?
I want to know who asked that question and who they were.
Miriam.
Who are you working for, Miriam? No, I think it's absolutely right, and it depends on the appetite of the sponsor, really. Some companies really like to invest a lot in, for example, informed consent, where they would get somebody to write it in their language, and they would invest in the testing of that, but that wouldn't be cognitive debriefing. It would be more like comprehension or readability testing or health literacy testing even. But in the vast majority of cases, informed consent forms, patient information sheets for clinical studies urgently need a lot of attention, because it's somewhere between a legal and a marketing script, full of medical jargon. Sometimes it can be 15 pages long, 20 pages long, and you see, when I say when I said at the beginning about companies differ in terms of their sincerity towards the patient voice agenda, it's in these subtle ways that you can tell whether they are sincere or not. And so if a company invests in making sure that patients really know what they are signing up to in a clinical study, then you would see really good informed consent forms. If it's just laissez-faire and just not given any investment at all, it's just it's just a task. It's just a checkbox. Yes, we've done the consent form. It's the same one that we've been using for 25 years. Then that's not sincerity into the patient voice. And the same goes for the patient information leaflets and the summary of product characteristics that lie behind the patient information leaflets and medical device IFUs and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's all of that activity happening, but as I said, companies differ in terms of their commitment to it and how much they want to spend.
You go, Miriam.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
No.
Mhm.
Oh, because my interface is frozen, so I don't know exactly what's happening. Okay, I'm glad you can. The reason why I asked that is I have well, it's very difficult to explain to someone who knows nothing about linguistic validation what it is in a short space of time, so that they don't get bored and start talking about something else. So that was the first thing. But most of the times I got a lot of people asking, but is it just about COAs? Because I work in other areas as well. And I do some translation also exactly of summary of products and informed consent and all of that. And the number of errors and issues that are in there are unbelievable, especially if it's updates. And that's where the question comes from. So is it just saying, okay, if you do clinical trials and you do a lot of COAs and so on, yes, there is a market there, or there is a market for more than that? Because I really don't see that. That's where the question came from. Thank you.
So what you're saying politely is that I didn't answer it.
No, I was just explaining where the question came from, because
Right.
because I just finished Noor's course, and it kind of seems like, what have you been doing during these 3 months, or what didn't you pay any attention? I did, but these are questions that people do, and it's not easy to answer. And I always like to tease a little bit and ask for whatever other people ask around as well. Okay, thank you.
I automatically think that I'm always in the wrong, so don't worry about that. Of course, there is this activity all around those, as you know, but it isn't the same method. You wouldn't use, like, even for the information sheet here, you wouldn't go through the you would just translate it after it's been readability tested, and that translation process isn't anywhere near as rigorous as the linguistic validation process, which I think is unique. I've never seen it in any other sector, really. You know, the 2 forward translations and that kind of thing. And
so you would say that it is, if we talk about LV, it's COAs mainly that we would work on. If I would say I want to be working in LV, then it's got to be COAs.
Yes, but like I said right at the beginning, when you work in different silos or sectors that would otherwise be silos, where people wouldn't otherwise be talking to each other, you see a lot of commonality and a lot of parallel activity. But you know, it's a bit like versions of Christianity where the doctrine is just slightly different to the other one. And so there are multiple ways that you can test the document. Cognitive briefing and linguistic validation is just one. And there's, you know, comprehension testing, readability testing. There's all kinds of like health literacy tests and that kind of thing. And what I would love to see actually in cognitive debriefing of COA and part of the linguistic validation methodology is for elements of those to be brought in, because it would strengthen it, and where they would rest upon the gold standard, the ISPO standard, but just give you that little bit more texture that elicits just a little better feedback from the patient, that gives real depth and therefore insights into the patient experience.
Well, I guess everybody who is, as for what I understood, most of the people who work with LV are also medical translators and work with other stuff like informed content form. And I guess you always take that LV into this project as well. You won't be just translating word by word. You will have afterthoughts. You will be more into the patient reading this. What I used to do is, as you said, those are a thing between marketing and regulatory. There's always the part first where it's explained to the informed content forms I'm talking about, where it's explained to the patients why and what. And I used to write this a bit more warmly and a bit more, easy, so that they understand. And then there's this regulatory part about data protection and stuff like that. And I write that more regulatory as well, like more legally, if you want to say so, because it's interesting that people are used to read this kind of content in a legal language. You everywhere where you read stuff like data protection and stuff, then you're expecting this. But if you want to know what you're going through and what this trial is going to be about, then you're expecting someone who takes some thought, some empathy again. And I could not translate it just, blank word by word without thinking about it. And I guess that's for everybody who is here and works in LV the same way. I have one more. Yeah, Nora?
I think one difference, I guess, that at least makes me think that COAs require this extra rigorous methodology, and I don't know, sponsors are not including it into other areas, or it's if we were to apply this process into informed consent forms, it would be huge, right? And at least if we do cognitive debriefing with an entire informed consent form, it would be like
5 days.
5 days. But the difference that I see is that COAs need to be responded by patients, and it's in regards to their experience, and there are decisions of whether the drug will move forward into commercialization or not. So we don't have to forget that COAs are used as endpoints in clinical trials. So they have a characteristic that has nothing to do with the summary of product characteristic or an informed consent form or talking about medical products. And it is a text, it is a survey, but in truth, it is used as an endpoint. It's let's say, it's not a biomarker. It's not. That's why it's called a COA, but it functions also at the level of a biomarker. In fact, there are some conditions that don't have biomarkers, and the only way of measuring the experiences or the patient's I can't get the word now that this is what happens to me, but you get what I say, is through COAs. And so that's why they need to be so rigorous, and this methodology has developed in order to attain that. So, but that doesn't mean that we cannot infuse part of this methodology into these other kinds of texts and make them more.
I think just going back to what you said a few minutes ago, Noah, that one of the things, because I started off life professional life as a translator. My first degree was translation, and I went immediately into sociolinguistics after that. I worked as a translator for 2 weeks. 3 weeks it was, and I went straight into sociolinguistics, and then I always had a lot of high opinions of translators because I had a high opinion of myself, and the working with translators, I realized that not a lot of them have good command of sociolinguistics in terms of that thing, this concept of audience design, designing a text for a given audience, and that is like technical to lay, or rather than just technical to technical. It's a skill that I've noticed, not just translators, but medical writers as well, that really struggle with technical to lay communication, and that's why we get, rubbish like these that nobody reads.
Yeah. I would like to go over to the next 2 questions, and then we might continue with the picture. Angelo asks if it would be a benefit that he is a patient himself for over 40 years in this process as a translator. I mean, in terms of understanding patients better or being able to be more sympathetic.
Of course, Angela, of course. That makes you an ideal in-country consultant.
That was my first intention too, even though I don't have any clue about it, but it sounds perfect.
Yeah, because that's where we understand. We are patients ourselves, and you will be working with any other conditions, but you know what it is, and you're going to be putting yourself all the time in the patient's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we need. That's the shift that it's required, and even better than being a clinician yourself, because from the standpoint of a clinician, you think you know. I mean, a clinician who has not been a patient in the sense of having a chronic condition or something, so you approach directly with kindness and empathy and an open mind, and it makes you an ideal cognitive debriefer as well, provided that you like it and you are trained thoroughly. Yes, well, at least it's my opinion. What do you think, Mark?
I totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's definitely, without disclosing too much, there's definitely a before and an after in my life in terms of conducting this research before a diagnosis, and doing it after, when you've been through the system, the care pathways and that kind of thing. You see things very differently.
Yeah. And also it helps if you're a caregiver. It helps immensely as well. So yeah, for sure.
Well, I hope, Angelo, we answered your question. Let's go to the next. It's already 7:30, so we already half an hour over the timer. But I'm glad nobody left yet. So well done. You seem to be interesting. Well, let's keep going. I guess so. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Does anybody know whether there a regulatory mandatory requirement for COAs to go through an LV process for the approval of drugs in clinical trials in every country? So the question is if there is a regulatory requirement for COAs to go through that process, or if that is everybody can do that or not.
So you mean that, let's say if we're doing a cognitive debriefing in 20 languages, that would be assessed by the local authority, the local competent authority in each country. So if we're doing a test for Eritrea, it would have to go through the Eritrean government. Is that what you're asking?
Yes,
Well,
sorry,
yeah.
I asked the question. Hi.
Hi.
Yes, not just for cognitive debriefing, but for the entire process from the concept elicitation to the end. Is it mandatory to go through the entire LV process? Or is it something that companies may choose to do or not?
No, you can't choose. You can't choose not to do it. You have to, you have to provide. Yeah. It's part of the clinical study submission before the clinical study happens. In a lot of cases.
Perfect. I think she nods her head. We are happy with that answer. Thank you, Mark and Nora. Nora, I lost track. Where did we?
We were in the reconciliation. So
Yes.
we are putting together the two forward translations, and then we get here. They call it target language version 1, and that forward translation, that result, it's going to be back translated. Keep in mind that we are going to be using the concept elaboration or the list of concepts all the time in each of the steps as much as possible. So that's back translated into English without using the source. And this back translation is intended to serve as a thorough analysis that it's going to come afterwards. And the back translation needs to be literal, but really conceptually literal, because you're not going to be translating, let's say, an idiom literally, because it wouldn't make any sense. So it needs to be literal up to a point and reflect as much as possible the syntax of the target that is being back translated within the limits of being correct in English. So then what we do is a comparison. We call it back translation review or back translation analysis of source, back translation, and the target version. And what we do, this is really, let's say, one of the key steps and the more thorough that we go through, because the first thing we do is to check if the back translation has been correctly done, and see if the target and the back translation is accurate. And then once that's checked, if not, we need to improve the back translation accordingly. And then that back translation is compared with source. And every single discrepancy needs to be indicated in terms of grammar, syntax, semantics. And we need to justify why those discrepancies are there. And those discrepancies can be due to just natural syntax differences, or that it has been back translated using a synonym, but in truth it's the same. Or these discrepancies can happen because the back translation is not as accurate, or because the forward translation hasn't been correctly translated. And we need to improve that, change that forward translation, provide again back translation, and so on. So that's a very, let's say, thorough process. We need to also harmonize everything in the sense of intra-textual. And once we have done that, we go through, in truth it's not here, but ideally we go through the process of harmonization, cross-cultural harmonization, meaning that all the 20 languages that have gone through this process are compared, and we check it against the list of concepts again, and try to see that every single concept has been accurately translated, that all the back translations are almost the same in the sense of equivalency. And any changes, because some languages may require, let's say some languages don't have two words for, let's say, ache and pain, they don't have it, you cannot translate it, you can only use one word, so there will be differences there. Or there are terms that need to be used, yes or yes, the developer wants to use that term, but we need to clarify it, adding some other lay terms in brackets. And then during the process of harmonization, we consider if these clarifications need to be added in the rest of the languages as well, so that we can keep all the different versions in different languages as much similar as possible. So that's what we do. And then depending on the type of COA, as if you remember, I told you there were 4 flavors. If we have COAs that, let's say, to make it short, if it's patient-facing text, if it's the patients who are going to be answering, or observer facing text, meaning the caregivers are going to be answering, but they are supposed to not be trained physicians or nurses or anything, they are going to go through cognitive debriefing process. Other times, questionnaires that are intended for clinicians but have patient-facing text inside may go through cognitive debriefing as well for those parts. And also maybe performance outcomes, the ones that I told you that ask for performing an activity, may go through that as well. So we do that, and we can either go that direction or go through what we call clinician review, meaning that a specialized clinician in the condition is going to review the entire questionnaire in terms of concepts and it's not a proofreading, it's ensuring that that's medically accurate. And sometimes in some projects we have both. We do cognitive debriefing, but we also pass it through clinician review. Before this, which I didn't say it and it's not reflected here, many times after the back translation analysis that we do here or review, we pass it through the developer or the client. The developer and sometimes the client review all of this as well. So we go into the world of cognitive debriefing that maybe Mark will explain a bit later, or I don't know how you're going to guide this, Kathrin, but in any case, we go through all the interviews with the patients, all this highly research aspect, and then there's a thorough analysis of all the data produced. And we come up with, well, here we produce, target language version 2. We put it through cognitive debriefing or clinician review. We do the analysis, and then we have this target version 3. In reality, after it has gone through the patients and we have done the different changes into the questionnaire, we almost have it. And then the process goes through a very thorough proofreading in the sense of revision and proofreading. So it's bilingual revision, monolingual revision, and then we revise the monolingual one. We tend to have an external reviewer, not only us, and so it goes then through quality control, and then final checks that we do to the layout. It goes through DTP as well, and then we produce the final version that it's going to be. This is talking about paper version questionnaires. We are not going to dive into ECOA, electronic forms here, formats, but this is more or less the process. We can complicate things by, for instance, adding another back translation. Instead of having one, we many times have 2 back translations, and then adding clinician reviews or developer reviews in different points in the process.
So this is just a schema. You can still change that. It's not going to be like that all the time.
No, and also we have difference if we are translating from English into any other language other than English, we're going to be doing something of this process, some parts of this process or all of it. But when it's the case of same language, different country, let's say we have English for US and we are localizing it into English for Australia, we are not going to be doing the back translation step because it's really an adaptation, what we call an validation. And so the methodology changes a bit. We are not going to be producing 2 forward translations and doing a reconciliation, but more of a direct adaptation. The in-country consultant will do a direct adaptation, and maybe another linguist will do that, and then that will be put together. Yeah, it's a kind of reconciliation, but it's a bit different.
Yeah.
So,
well, there is another question. Are translators involved in the conceptual analysis of the source questionnaire? It's the question from Erika.
Well, in this case, normally it's the in-house team, the project managers, the team lead, and the different researchers in there. And of course, they can be translators. Yes. So in this case, normally, yes, in the sense, but they are not working as a translators only. They are the ones taking care of the project. At least they should be. You mean the conceptual analysis of the source? Yes, yes. So it's someone like Mark, for example, doing that, not, let's say, a regular translator, medical translator that would be doing that, because that takes a lot of, the conceptual analysis requires sociolinguistics, requires ample experience with COAs, it requires knowing very thoroughly the questionnaire in terms of the scientific properties. So, and also anticipating many issues that may arise.
But
yeah,
the translator is at an advantage though if they wanted to get started in that area, because it sits on the intersection of a number of disciplines, and translation, all the skills that a translator have is in the eye of that. Well, it's not a storm, but you know what I mean anyway. I'm mixing metaphors.
Sounds like a storm, definitely.
The thing is that it needs to be, let's say, for example, I guess people who have been trained in our course, and mostly the ones that are English native speakers, I understand, because if they are analyzing the source, this is the English one.
Yeah.
And some of them have sociolinguistic backgrounds and everything. They are, I also agree, they are ideal. In my case, for example, I studied, the healthcare part, but I also studied English philology, it's called here in Spain, and also sociolinguistics. And so, translators, I guess, but they need to be working very, very, in a very specialized way. In this case.
A multidisciplinary way. There's philosophy of language as well, so that goes right into semantics, and who is best positioned to work in the area of semantics than a translator. So it's just a matter of exposure and training, I guess. But I think a translator is more appropriate to do concept elaboration than some project manager at a company who, I don't know, did sports studies or whatever.
Yeah, we do that. We train the students into concept elaboration, and they practice how to do it, and also translatability assessments. So because the idea is to get them trained to be able to be more involved into COA development itself, but also in these early stages, because many times this is given to project managers who have never done projects in cognitive debriefing, or in linguistic validation, have never interviewed patients, and they just cannot anticipate many, many issues that an in-country consultant has. So I guess that's the path, Mark, you too, and myself, beginning as in-country consultants, and then with the background, with the studies and everything, university studies and so on, and being patients as well, and being healthcare, but then infusing all of that and getting into.
I think Erika, she sent a thumb up, so she's happy with the answer. And I would really like to give the cognitive debriefing a few minutes still, because that is something we keep hearing as well. We talked about that a lot already, so maybe we don't need to go too deep in it, but I think we need some clarification how that actually works. So that is kind of like cognitive debriefing, as I understood, is one part of LV. where do you get the patients from? Do you use like online interviews? Do you have people in countries which are doing that in person? Walk us through it, please.
I would like to clarify one thing before we move
Yes.
forward in relation to cognitive debriefing, that it's cognitive debriefing is within the workflow of linguistic validation, but cognitive debriefing is not dependent on linguistic validation. Cognitive debriefing is done right patient voice research. It's done during the development of the questionnaire, so it's not dependent on linguistic validation. So it's to clarify that.
Here, and you can drag drop it into here.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's like in the same way that translation, medical translation is not dependent on linguistic validation. We are using it there. Yes, well, the same way with cognitive debriefing. So it's an important.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, sure. Mark,
No.
I think that's.
Well, I think this is because there's going to be a follow-up of this. We're going to do this, aren't we? I think it's probably, I would love to, because patient recruitment is a huge area and it deserves attention. But I'll just give very broadly, there are two methods or two approaches to patient recruitment. And the first approach is what I call on radar. So that would be getting ethical approval, going to, so if we need 5 cancer patients in Berlin, we get ethical approval from a local ethics board in Berlin. If we're doing it in Zurich, we get that approval. But the problem is that doesn't tally well with the typical timeline of linguistic validation. So it's becoming shorter and shorter, the timelines, and there are time pressures, as we said in the conversation that we had last week, where ethical approval takes, in some countries it can be months, in even when there's fast turnaround, it's still a couple of months. So that doesn't tally with the timeline where it's becoming normally it should be about 12 weeks for linguistic validation, but it's been shrunken down to 8, 6, and I don't think it can go much further than that, to be honest. So that means that people need to develop an under the radar way, and linguistic validation is good for that because you can position it as it's a language exercise. You need people from a given condition, a given illness, in order to give the insights, but we're not asking any specific questions about their health. So that enables us to kind of skirt around the ethical issues. And so if we're doing a 20-country study, how do we get 5 cancer patients in each one? Well, one thing's for certain is that this is going to be controversial. Patient recruitment is in no way part of a translator's job description or experience. So I'll just stop that comment there. So what we do is we use healthcare professionals. Most of our cognitive debriefers are healthcare professionals, and that means that the process of recruitment is cleaner. It's auditable.
I completely understand that. What would you say? I see that people are leaving. Shall we take this whole cognitive debriefing into another MedTalk, as it doesn't seem fair to not give it enough time to discuss.
It needs time, because it's an area where there's a lot of poor practice that could be called out, or a light shone upon it, rather.
Yeah, well then we stick to that, and then I will thank you for today for all the information. I'm really glad we recorded that, because then you can go back and forth to, it's a lot of information, and you two have been amazing. sharing so many insights and so thoroughly. You get lots of applause.
Thank you, all of you.
I got a heart. That was for me.
That
Andrew,
is
isn't it?
sweet. That's only for you.
Where were the hearts?
I can't do that, you know. I can't.
There you go.
Oh, sweeties, that is so sweet. What a great end for a great meeting, right? Now I'm really, really grateful for everything, for the time you took for the preparation for this talk, for the time you took today. We all know time is precious, but I think we all learned heaps today and got a really good idea about what it is.
Thank you.
We've got so much left to talk about, Karin said. Yeah, I get that. You know, it's got to be serious. I told you so. Awesome. Oh, no, one thing now, everybody left. No, there's still people here. We did want to say some things about your courses, the upcoming courses, because as we say, there's lots and lots to talk about and lots to learn about. So here's your spot. Please introduce your courses.
Yes, yeah, it's true. Well, we have the upcoming courses that we have. It's one on cognitive debriefing that we will be launching it by the end of September, I think, Mark, right? We'll get there. Yeah. And then the other one, it's the next edition of, it will be the 4th edition of the Linguistic Validation Specialization course, and that will take place in October, more or less by the end of October. And in autumn, it's the autumn edition. And then we are launching, but that will be spring next year, the first course on patient voice research, so that we can tap into all these areas that Mark is opening for us. And it's really beautiful work with patients. And yeah, so that's something that we can dive into from linguistic validation, move towards there. So,
well, I would say once you said in the beginning or before we started this MedTalk that you are going to post it on LinkedIn, I would ask you to hashtag MedTalks in it so that all our participants and the others who haven't been here see when it's launched, because yeah, it is a message that needs to be spread.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, and for sure, you can contact us directly if you have any questions or want more thorough information about the courses, and also connect with the rest of our community members and former students who can just also, share their experiences, for sure.
Perfect.
For sure. They are amazing, so.
Awesome. So yeah, we keep going like this, right? And we are going to have a few other talks. Thank you all for being here. It's been amazing. Thank you for the questions as well. It's always good when people interact.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say bye and have a good rest of your day or evening.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.